This is Office Talk with Annette Stepanian. Welcome back to another episode of Office Talk. I'm your host, Annette Stepanian, and in this week's episode, I'm having a really great conversation and an important one with Kristy Rice of Momental Designs. Now, if you find yourself that you're in a creative line of work, for example, maybe you're an artist, maybe you're a designer, maybe you're a jewelry maker, or you want to figure out a way that you can grow and scale your business, I want you to make sure to listen to this episode. Kristy's business, Momental Design, is all about creating custom, hand-painted invitations and stationery for weddings and events. And her business, you would think that's something that can't be scaled, right? Because it's all requires her unique art skills and her aesthetic. Well, she has proven that statement wrong. Kristy has scaled her business in such a way where she's been able to move away from the day-to-day doing to the dreaming. And as a result, she's been able to create multiple revenue streams. And I really encourage all of you guys to have a listen to this episode because it is a beautiful lesson and maybe even a reminder that we need to be thinking about how are we structuring our businesses so that we could step away from the day-to-day doing and start moving towards the dreaming. With that said, let's dive into my conversation with Kristy Rice. Hi, Kristy. Thank you again for joining me on Office Talk this week.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for having me.
Now, I met you, almost a year ago when you spoke at B Sage Conference. And there are a lot of facets to you. You are, I feel like, just, and I mean that in a really good way, in the sense that you are just a force of creativity and this energy, and but also really business savvy as well. And so I'm excited to have you on here, especially for those folks who are artists or very creative in the work that they do. I want them to hear about how you have taken that creativity and transformed it into a very successful business. So before we dive in, why don't we bring our listeners up to speed as to who you are and what you do?
Great. Well, I'm Kristy, as you know, and where do I start? I always tell the joke that my elevator pitch is 3 minutes long, not 30 seconds, but whatever. So I am the founder and creative director of Momental Designs, which is a boutique stationery studio where we actually hand paint bespoke stationery for couples worldwide. So we have a team of 7 full-time artists, designers, craftspeople that we, we're just a big happy family. And we work with couples all over the world, and we do about 400 plus fully bespoke projects a year. And myself, in the last few years, I've been able to kind of back away a little bit from the day-to-day of Momental, and I've started writing books. So I am an 8-time author currently, soon to be 9. And I love styling. I do a lot of styling work for bridal publications. And most recently, we had the cover shoot for Destination Ideal magazine. So that was really fun. And that was in Scotland. And what else do? I license artwork, which is great. We've licensed artwork with, big brands like Bed Bath & Beyond, Anthropologie, Ecolo. So lots of good stuff.
I know, and I want to dig into so much of that because I do see a lot of artists who want to make a living off of their artwork, their creativity, and it can be challenging to do that. And I think what's so intriguing about what you've done is you've taken something that can be very personal and hands-on. You're literally hand painting invitations, right?
Yes, literally.
So, how did you even begin to think about, how can I scale this? Because I'm sure at a certain point you're like, I can't be the one hand painting this. If I really want to grow, I have to figure out a way to bring in people to help me. But how do you outsource something that is so personal and can be almost so specific to the individual?
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's a great question. And I'll be honest, in the beginning, I had no intentions of scaling my business. I literally was the girl sitting at, her dining room table, just like scratching out little hydrangeas on 100 invitations. So I wasn't a big dreamer. I like to be honest about that because I think that is very telling for a lot of people. They're not these big dreamers. Things just kind of evolve. And that's really how it was for me. Now I'm a big dreamer. Now I'm like, I drive my husband and my staff crazy with my big dreams. But, you know, it became very clear about 5 years in that I could no longer just do this myself and with, a few part-timers, a couple hours a week, that if I wanted to continue the business and I wanted to continue to build revenue and all of that, that I needed to bring in more of a team. And it was an incredibly stressful time. And, we did experience for years turnover in the team that we were developing because it is difficult. How do you train someone to paint like Kristy Rice? How do you do that? And so, we simply, not simply, but we developed a kind of a training course for anyone that was coming on board our team. And there were literally tests involved, painting tests, cutting tests, all of the skills that go into being a production artist at Momental. We really broke those skills down into kind of manageable parts that could be learned. And so I think what's interesting about that, and it's something that creative entrepreneurs don't often think about, is that you're creative, you're an artist, and how do you kind of serialize such a creative, organic process? But if you want to scale that process and make more money, you have to break it down and you have to be able to teach it. So I think that is the biggest takeaway, is that you kind of have to kind of get out of your creative headspace for a little bit and be able to break down your process so that you can teach it to someone.
There's so much there that I loved. I mean, it's the idea that, I mean, it wasn't easy. I appreciate that honesty. As someone who is looking to bring people on, it's something I struggle with too. It's like, it's going to be a process, but you realize
Yes.
like at a certain point, you just can't keep doing everything or most of the things yourself. And I'm curious, so with the breaking down of the process, is that something that you developed, that you were like, okay, if I were to teach somebody how I do this, I'm going to, create these videos or these tests or whatnot, or was that kind of a collaboration in and of itself with the people who you were training?
So that was a collaboration with the folks that I already had on team, because I wanted to not only have my perspective and my style, obviously reflected in those teachings, but I wanted, at that point where we were really coming up with a training program, I had already had, 2 other full-time people on board. So I wanted their input because, their perspective of our production and artistic process could be different than mine. And I wanted that input there. So yes, it definitely was not something I just created myself.
And you said earlier that now all you do is not all you do, but like you're the dreamer, you dream of all these big things and you maybe drive your team a little nuts with all these, ideas that you have. And so what has given you, like what changed for you? Because you said in the beginning of your business, you really weren't like that. But what shifted? At what point were you like, oh, now I'm giving myself that permission to dream?
Yeah. That is I love that question, actually. It's not one that anyone's ever asked me. Because in the beginning, I was like, I don't want to work for the man. I just want to run a business and do my thing creatively. And so what shifted for me from that kind of small thinking was having the headspace to think big. And so for many years, I'll even say, we've been in business now this is our 15th year.
Wow, congrats.
Thank you. Even 8-9 years into the business, I was still, hunkered down and weighted down by the day-to-day of doing my business. And so I didn't have any space emotionally, physically, mentally left to be that big dreamer. I was just so stuck in the day to day, in the production, in all of that. And that's not to say that all of those elements of my business are not honorable, because they are. They are they are the bread and butter of my business. But to be that big dreamer, you have to find a way to give yourself space to be a dreamer. And I never let myself do that. I never did until actually it was until around 2014, to be quite honest, which isn't so long ago.
Yeah.
That I looked at my team. I realized I was micromanaging them a lot. I realized that they had a lot of better ideas about some things than I did. And I wasn't utilizing their talents, their gifts, their talents, their abilities. And so I forced myself to step back, to let them kind of own a lot of the process in the day-to-day of the business. And honestly, magic started happening at that point.
Yeah. Oh, this resonates with me so much. I feel like I needed to hear this. And I know it's going to be valuable for a lot of people too. And so what role does your team play now in your business? Like very high level, like how have you structured that so you have that white space to dream?
Yes. So we have 7 on staff right now. And we've tried it all. We've had as much as 15 people on staff, a lot of part-timers, a lot of freelancers, and that just was messy for us. So this is a really good place for us, 7 full-time. And what it looks like is we have a communications manager, and she handles all of the email correspondence, all of the invoicing, proofing, and just general customer happiness kind of tasks. We have a full-time graphic designer. That's pretty self-explanatory. We have a full-time artist. She is my right hand, and that is a whole other realm of this. I brought her on. Her style is similar to mine, but more of a complement than a copy. Mm-hmm. She does a lot of our prototyping and things like that. She speaks with all of our clients. She gets them to, reveal all of their wonderful ideas with our help. We have a production manager, and then the rest of our team are invitation artists that handle production. So that's kind of the basic structure.
Nice. It's a pretty lean team for the amount of work mm-hmm. that you're doing. Mm-hmm. So one of the projects that has, now that you have the time and the space, you mentioned that you have been an author of quite a few books and quite a few yes. coming down the pike. So what has that experience been like? Can you talk about what, you just woke up one day and you're like, I want to write a book? And because I think a lot of people have being an author on their bucket list, and they want to share, their talents with the world in the form of a book. So tell me about that experience.
Yes. So, and it is quite the experience. I do feel in a lot of ways it was for me kind of I woke up one morning and I decided I wanted to write a book. I was at an industry conference. Sylvia Weinstock, she's the queen of cakes, was gifting the entire conference her book, Sensational Cakes. I've told this story many times, and I'm not sure whether it was in my head or in reality, but I recall them being brought out on silver platters, and I just had a moment with that. And I was like, oh my gosh, here is this icon of our industry, of the wedding industry. And she's written this beautiful, big hardcover book, and now she's gifting it to everyone in the room. And that, it wasn't so much the book, I'll be honest, that I wanted to do, but I wanted to have that moment for myself. I'm being a little selfish and narcissistic here, but I wanted to be able to have that moment and give my creation to a book of, or to a room of my peers. And so that's what started it for me, honestly.
And then what do you do? What's the next step? I mean, because you haven't self-published, you have publishers. No. So what did that look like in terms of, did you have to write a book proposal? How did that all work out for you?
Yes. So one of the things I had mentioned, I'm a stylist. I do a lot of editorial work for publications. And so in my head, when I was like, oh, I want to write a book, but what's it going to be about? I immediately went back to kind of my volume of work, editorial speaking, and was like, okay, that should be the book, because everything I do editorial is very kind of based in fine art, often inspired by painters of history. And so that was the first step. I think I'm going to do a book about, editorial inspired by fine artists. I had a few friends that had been published, and they were kind enough to actually introduce me to their publisher. I work with Schiffer Publishing, and I had been working on a book pitch. I tend to be very overzealous in almost everything I do now. And my book pitch was basically a book. I had it hardbound. I had glossy pages. It was like 60 pages long. I submitted it. I actually sent in a physical copy to the publisher, and they were sending me a contract within 2 weeks of receiving it. The pitch.
That. I love that.
And they said to me, they're like, I gotta be honest, Kristy, we've never received a pitch like this. You really went above and beyond. I'm like, yeah, that's how I roll.
That's amazing. Yeah, you can't half-ass it.
No, I've never been one to half-ass anything. So, and oddly enough, of course, I received the contract. It was a huge milestone for me, totally enamored with the whole experience at that time, signed the contract. And then one afternoon, I had this idea. My communications manager at the studio was like, hey, those like coloring books for adults? Those are cool, but you should do one for watercolor. And like, mind you, I had just signed a book contract with my brand new publisher that I don't know very well.
Yeah.
So I was like, Kelly, that's an amazing idea. And so I literally emailed the head of the publishing company, and I was like, hey, I know this is insane, but I have this idea and I think it's really good. And he's like, well, send it over. And I sent it over. It was basically a glorified scribbling on a napkin compared to, my first book pitch. And within a week, I had a contract in front of me for 4 books, 3 books.
Gosh.
A series. And they're like, we want to do a series. We need to get this out now. It was very timely. We rushed the entire process, and the rest is history. Now we have 2 series, a total of 7 books, and we created the world's first watercoloring book. So,
and you couldn't have done that unless you had the time and the space to create that, right? And
absolutely
if you were caught in like, oh, I need to get the invitations for Joe's wedding out, and you're like hand painting these, you couldn't get these opportunities, or even not that you couldn't get them, you couldn't fulfill and follow through on these opportunities because you were going to be bogged down with that other stuff.
Absolutely not. And to be honest, my book pitch for the Painter's Wedding, the big crazy hardbound one, I had been working on that for 3 years.
Wow.
So I had been working on that during a time where I was still very much in my business. So that's a testament to that fact right there, that I couldn't even get the book pitch finished because I was so bogged down by everything else.
So talk to me about the Painter's Wedding. Talk to me about that book. What is it all about?
Well, the Painter's Wedding, it's 16 chapters, and it's not a coffee table book. It is lovely and beautiful, and it's everything you would expect from a wedding inspiration book, but more. Each chapter kind of dives deep into the thought process behind the inspirational artist chosen. And it really dives deep into the thought process of a fine artist in a way that is, consumable for a couple just trying to come up with their wedding design. So we teach people how to understand composition, how to understand things like scale and proportion, and how that all applies to a really beautiful decor plan. So I don't profess to be a wedding planner. I am not a wedding designer, but I am an artist and I'm a painter, and I have this knowledge in me and this experience in me that I felt could be really valuable in the very early stages of wedding planning. So it's a very visual book. So there's beautiful editorial in each chapter inspired by a fine artist. And then there are spreads in each chapter that really break down the thought process and visualize the thought process behind each chapter, to really help couples figure out how to dream up their wedding, not just how to go to Pinterest and choose their wedding. So that is the big point of the painter's wedding.
Now I have to ask you, have you had your silver platter moment with this book? Please tell me you have.
I have, and it was quite the epic one. I had two silver platter moments. One was with the watercoloring books. I was able to go to Engage in 2016. Engage, if you're in the wedding industry, it's the big luxury business summit for weddings. And I was able to gift my watercoloring books to a room of almost 500. And that was incredible. That was incredible.
I can almost imagine in my head. I don't know why I'm imagining like these men dressed in like butler, like tuxedo things with like white gloves and like the tails and walking around.
Quite like that.
I know, but that's what I envision. Like and then they like pop some champagne.
Yeah. The painter's wedding, I had quite the experience as well. I worked with Leslie Maston Events and Dadong, New York. A very up-and-coming new restaurant in New York City, and they sponsored an incredible book launch party for the painter's wedding. And we had over 100 of just some of my best friends in the industry there to celebrate, and we were able to gift the book and have a wonderful evening of music and celebration. It was fantastic. So it was everything and more that I could have dreamed of.
Oh, I have a huge smile on my face knowing that you had this little inkling vision, and you made it happen, like not just once, but several times over.
Oh my gosh, I still can't believe it.
So as someone who has been in the industry for quite a while, I mean, 15 years in business is no small feat. I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes through the last, I mean, even we didn't, like 10, 11 years ago, we didn't have an iPhone, right? So when you started, there were no iPhones. I mean, was Facebook even a thing? I don't even know.
Barely.
Yeah, barely, right? We're of that generation.
Yeah,
we remember the analog life.
Yeah.
Sometimes I miss it really badly. But so I would love your thoughts on, how do you guys stay relevant in an economy that it's changing, it's evolving, your consumer has changed. I read recently that, like in the wedding planning industry, it's expected to shrink over the next few years because there are a lot of, let's say, DIY couples who are now, using technology and things of that nature to plan their weddings, right? So the dynamics have shifted. So what are your thoughts? What's kind of worked for you? How have you guys approached this reality?
Yeah. And this is an extreme reality for anyone in the wedding industry. Let's face it. I hate to use the M word, but millennials have the buying power right now. They are making the buying decisions across the board. And so they have a very different approach to weddings, especially. They want an experience. And just like the global retail economy for years, it's an experiential economy right now. And it will continue to be, and it will evolve to be even more robust of an experiential economy. I truly believe that. And what that means, entertainers, food service, all of those type of wedding needs are becoming really hot and really big, and that's where they're spending their money. Photographers, even, shockingly enough, stationers, of course, wedding planners. We are in a category where we could be potentially categorized as non-experiential. And so we are in a position to figure out, how do we keep up? how do we make sure that our couples still see us as providing an experience, not only for them, and it's really not so much about providing an experience for the couple. Millennial couples want an experience for their guests. They want their biggest point in planning a wedding, and I'm generalizing here, but this is useful. Their biggest point is that they want their guests to have a good time and walk away saying that was the best party I've ever been to.
They want something to talk about, right? Like,
absolutely.
Yeah, Instagram worthy.
They want it. They want something to fill their Instagram hashtag feed. They want something to talk about. But they do still truly want their guests to have an authentic, good time. So, our team has, we're lucky in that our work, it is very bespoke. It's very custom. It's high touch. So, we're a little bit of an advantage as this economy shifts, but still a lot of our couples are, they're going to other sources. We have to be careful in how we approach that client experience, because they have a lot of options that are more affordable and are more simple and just get the job done when it comes to stationery. So we've made it very important to let our couples know and to show them that we are giving that we are giving their guests an experience. And so that's been the biggest thing. So that may look like, finding really innovative ways of packaging the invitation, ways that, are not just accessible to the very wealthy. We're looking for ways that, upper middle class couples can really innovate with packaging, because packaging makes an invitation feel more like a gift. And that right there is an experience. So, we're really trying to innovate with pricing and with packaging. And we're also trying to innovate with how are our guests communicating with one another, with their vendors, how are they communicating with their guests? And so, we're developing right now social media packages where we're offering, wedding website design. We're offering development of custom GIFs for Instagram stories.
Oh, wow.
We're offering development of custom Snapchat filters. So all of these things, it's not just about the paper, it's about the whole artwork experience. Wherever there's artwork at your event, Momental Designs is going to turn that into an experience from all different angles. So, yeah, that's what we're doing.
What I loved about just this whole topic is that you didn't gripe about, like these millennials and these right? And this is how things have always been done. Rather, maybe you've done it behind closed doors. I don't know. But for purposes of our conversation, you didn't. And so what I liked is that you said, well, how can we communicate with them? How can we create products and services that meet the needs of this changing buyer? And so
absolutely,
you just took all that energy just off the table and put it into something that has hopefully proven to be productive for you guys and connecting with your buyers. So
yeah, absolutely. I'll be honest. I mean, we've seen things change over 15 years, and I really love this generation in terms of how they approach their wedding design. They are very authentic, and they really are trying to connect with their guests, with their family, and with each other. It's not about showing off. And I love that. So, yeah.
Oh, makes me think about my wedding, but that's a topic for another conversation. So I would be remiss if I didn't, as a lawyer, ask you about all these wonderful licensing opportunities that have come your way. I know when I work with different, whether they're surface pattern designers or other, artists and whatnot, licensing is a huge way in which they can monetize their work, expand their reach and their visibility. And like you said, you've worked with some really big brands like Bed Bath & Beyond, and Anthropologie was one of my favorite stores. I would love to learn or hear more about how those opportunities came to be, and and what advice you would give to folks who are interested in licensing, or maybe they've done their first licensing deal, and just, I would love your thoughts on this, just as someone who has so much experience in this area.
Sure. Licensing is a whole other planet, really, as an artist. And if you think you're going to license artwork as a personal outlet for your creative genius, think again, because you're creating artwork for the man. It is wonderful. It is a great way to monetize your talent, but don't have delusions about it. That is my biggest piece of advice. You are developing artwork for the market, not for yourself. Mm-hmm. So for years, I did a lot of licensing just piecemeal as it would come to me. We would get, contacted by different art buyers that worked with places like Bed Bath & Beyond or Target. And we would just, do these individual deals and be on our way. And we worked with Anthropologie through Plum Pretty Sugar. I hope I said that the right way. Sometimes I say it backwards. The beautiful robes, we all know them, that everybody aspires to have in their getting ready shots for the day. And they contacted us directly to develop some custom patterns for their collection for Anthropologie. So a lot of the licensing work that we've done in the past was just very much by chance. But I started to see a trend, and I was like, you know what, we're getting more and more requests, and I want to try to put this into kind of a system or an opportunity where I can be getting this kind of work more consistently. So about a year ago, I did sign up with an art rep, and that has been a very good experience. It's a profitable experience, but a very interesting one. So I think, getting an art rep is difficult because everybody wants an art rep. Everybody wants to have their work, taken out there and kind of sold to the masses. And because it seems like a perfect idea, a perfect way to get more money in your bank account. But it's an interesting experience as a creative mind, but it's been a good one. So now our licensing is all done through my art rep.
Okay.
And
go ahead.
Yeah.
So if someone is taking like the first few steps in the licensing world, so don't be delusional. No. Know that like your art has to be consumable for the masses, like you said. Yes. So it's maybe going to be watered down. I don't know what the right term would be, but like scaled back a little bit. What other tips do you have as to how they could approach or find these opportunities? Because you've kind of had it in the sounds like they've come to you, which is an ideal situation to be in. But do you have any insight on maybe if no one's knocking on their door, how they can go about starting these relationships?
Yeah, I'll be honest. Don't wait around for someone to come to you. I was so busy with Momental that I didn't really even think of chasing after an art rep. But here's the thing. Most art reps worth their salt. You're not paying them to represent you. They just take a cut of your work when you do get a buy. Mm-hmm. So seek out an art rep. Don't wait for people to contact you. Nobody's got time for that. If I had to do that over again, I wouldn't have waited. I would have sought out an art rep that was willing to take me. That will be difficult. So I think, your first step is to research all the art reps out there. Just get on Google and go to town and just take a look at every single art rep you can find. You're going to see art reps that have a great presence online. They have a great Instagram account, and you're going to be like, I want them to rep me. And most likely they're going to be the difficult ones to apply with and get taken on by. But at the same time, there are great reps out there that maybe are a little bit under the radar on social media that are just as fantastic and can bring you just as much money. So I think the next best step for someone just launching into licensing is to try to find a rep. Absolutely.
Wonderful. So, Kristy, there was so much in here. That's what I love about you, is that like you're a true artist. You have an artist's heart and vision, but then you balance that with a very like just like a business approach as well, you know? And you found a nice balance between both. That I think sometimes we tell ourselves a story that we're either just creative and business isn't our thing, or like we're like business and numbers minded and creativity isn't our thing, right? I think we usually pick a side, but I think I don't know if I always believe that.
I don't believe that. You have to pick, you can't pick a side. If you're a creative and you want to make money, you've got to straddle. You can't pick a side.
Okay, I'm going to take that as the quote for this episode. You've got to straddle. Okay.
Yeah.
You heard it first from Kristy Rice. Well, Kristy, thank you for taking the time to share all of your inspiration, your insight, your business know-how with us. I know it's going to be truly, truly valuable for the folks who are listening to this episode.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been super fun.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I know I did, and it was a beautiful reminder for me as well as I look into the future about how I want to set up my business. If you want to learn more about Kristy and you want to connect with her, you can head on over to her website at momentaldesigns.com, and you can find her over on Instagram at Momental. Okay, you guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Office Talk, and I'll catch you later.